Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. I've previously talked about breaking down emotions into our physical sensations, our thoughts, and our behaviors. And today I really want to focus on how we can help kids learn to manage the thoughts, right? So managing those thoughts to better handle anxiety and other big emotions. This is really important for building resilience since we're on our journey of resilience. When we look at anxiety and other big feelings, they're not the result of a specific situation or a specific trigger. They really stem from how we perceive and how we think about situations rather than the situations themselves. Now, I've talked a lot about reconnecting physiologically and knowing what's happening in our body. I've talked about being mindful and acceptance, which are also important to think about when we talk about our thinking. That mindfulness, being aware of our thoughts, but the acceptance of recognizing it's just a thought. I love Barry's quote from Peter Pan. He said that the moment that you doubt whether you can fly, you cease forever to be able to do it. Our thinking is so powerful. Just the belief that I can or cannot do something, right? And that's a big piece. What anxiety is telling us is I can't handle it. So when an emotion comes up, we tend to automatically evaluate that situation and whatever triggered that emotion in the first place. We have to remember when we go through this evaluative process that our brain is wired for survival, which means it has this negativity bias, right? What's going to keep us alive? Looking out for the things that are going to make us not alive anymore. So this bias makes it more likely to perceive and to react to potential threats, even if they're imagined, even if it's exaggerated, even if it's not real, right? These non-threats. Our brain wasn't built to be happy because being happy meant we would let our guards down. We wouldn't be looking out for danger, right? That emotional part of our brain, its job is to always look out for danger, 24/7, always looking out for danger. Any uncertainty is misinterpreted, okay, because uncertainty could be a threat against our survival. So we see events as threats, and it becomes so ingrained in our brain to keep us safe in the future. That's why our brain is built that way and why it's so easy to build those pathways, those fear pathways. If anyone experiences a negative event like being laughed at, rejection, we're going to continue to look out for rejection. The brain can't tell the difference. I'm talking about this all the time between whether it's actually seeing something that's going to eat us and what I imagine. It's going to react as truth every time. Kids are really creative. And our sensitive ones with big worries, they can get the better of them, right? Especially when they start to develop ideas that I'm going to mess up, or everyone's going to laugh at me, or I can't do this, and it's the end of the universe. So if a kiddo worries about making a mistake during a class presentation, for example, because everyone's going to laugh at them, they might start to feel anxious every time they think about speaking in front of others at all, right? And so that's why we see things like accommodations where, okay, you don't have to present, you could do something different. And then it just swirls into bigger and bigger things because I just can't talk in front of anybody. So they start to worry about something happening in the future. They might have really unrealistic and extreme thoughts, but they could also be really subtle ones too, like I'm going to get yelled at, or I'm going to make a mistake on my test. And then those snowball into the bigger unrealistic and extreme thoughts. Unfortunately, like I said, our brain can't tell the difference between what it sees and what it imagines. And through our cortex, we can start creating imagined worries. The brain doesn't know the difference. And so anytime there's a false alarm and it's rung, our adrenal glands, it's still going to send out all of those different chemicals into our body to get ready for to fight or to run away because it doesn't know. It's just the brain is sending it signals. It doesn't know where it's coming from. But even when that false alarm is rung, again, those adrenal glands are still going to let out everything going on so that we can it's all about fittest of survival, right? It's all about survival. And when we have an infinite amount of thoughts, most of which are outside of our awareness, it's going to start affecting us. right? And so it's usually those scary ones that jump out at us. We can't push them away, we can't control them. But that's why, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, a lot of times it's even out of our awareness, but our body and, mind are picking these pieces up where we might start feeling anxious without ever knowing why. But like I said, even if we do have that conscious awareness, which is why mindfulness is so important, it's not about controlling it. That's what our kids try to do. That's what we tell them to do, right? We tell them to just think happy thoughts, right? Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal, right? We're always telling them those things, but it doesn't work. What they need to realize, it's just a work. We don't want to get caught up in the content with them or with anything else, right? And so it's, what are you worried about? We start asking all of these questions. It's just going to make it bigger and bigger, right? We're getting caught in that trap. So we just need them to let those thoughts float along, right? Just float alongside us. It's just another piece of information, just like I can hear some background noise right now, like an airplane. It's just another piece of information. And that's why the mindfulness and acceptance piece is so important. Now, I like to ask kids, how successful people have been, whether themselves or people that they know, in trying to control their anxiety. So we can ask kids to rate their success in controlling their anxiety, making it go away, thinking happy thoughts and not worrying about it, everything that we're always telling them to do. That's really helpful so that they can understand that, controlling anxiety is not possible. What is possible is changing our reaction to it. That's what we need to do. I have a teen who experienced a lot of OCD, and we talked a lot about how successful they were in controlling the obsessions, right? Those obsessive thoughts that, oh my gosh, somebody's going to break in, somebody's going to break in. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how successful have you been controlling those obsessions? Low. Right? Anytime I ask this question, they're low. No success at controlling them at all. The more I try to control those thoughts and push them away, the bigger they come. What if this is the time? And so then I ask them, in this one particular kid, if maybe, do you think you haven't tried hard enough? Or maybe you haven't tried the right thing to stop those obsessions? Not at all true. Right? All of my kids put in, 10 out of 10 for effort. They are trying really hard. They don't like having these obsessions. They do everything that they can to get rid of them. And so then there's this sort of back and forth sort of battle where the obsessions, they almost always win. The more that we try to push them away, the bigger they become. And so there's just this overwhelming need to follow through with the compulsion. Okay. So when I ask them though, what if we stop fighting? What if we stop fighting for that control to get rid of them and just focused on living life without changing anything else? Just respond to anxiety, respond to obsessions differently, right? That's what we need to do. Because otherwise it's like the Chinese finger trap, right? The more we try to pull, our fingers out, the more trapped we get. So the more we're trying to pull away from anxiety, the more trapped we get. So these are things that we really want to think about. We've got this ironic processing in the brain. As soon as I say, don't think of a white bear, whatever you do, don't think of a white bear, of course, our mind is going to go right to that white bear, right? Exactly to where we said not to. That's that ironic processing in the brain. It's always going to go there, especially when we try to make sure that it doesn't, when we try to control it, when we try to force it not to. So fighting anxiety, try to control anxiety, trying to avoid anxiety, it's only making that anxiety stronger. And yet again, as adults, just think about all the things that we're telling kids not to think about, not to worry about, right? It just doesn't work. And so we need to be careful with that as well. And so that's, again, I'm always coming back to that mindful awareness of what's going on in our body and now of our thoughts. Right? We don't need to do anything with those thoughts other than notice them. And really, we want to get curious. I'm always talking about that curiosity trait. We need to have that. Get them to be curious about them. So we're being those emotion detectives. Before I talked about the emotion detective for our physical feelings, and now we're focusing on our thoughts. Okay. So, yes, there's a lot of different thinking traps. If we're going to be looking at cognitive distortions or different thinking traps, but really there's two fundamental misappraisals when we're looking at anxiety. The first is overestimation. We're overestimating the likelihood of a negative event happening. For sure, something bad is going to happen, for sure. Right? It's that mixing up probability and possibility, like just the fact that there is a possibility it could happen, it's for sure going to happen. Okay, that's overestimating. The second is, we let that anxiety, it just gets to this really exaggerated conclusion of what the consequences of that negative event is going to be, right? And underestimating our ability to handle it. So this is what we call catastrophizing, right? So for sure, overestimating, it's for sure going to happen, catastrophizing, and if it does happen, it's the end of the universe, and I have no way to handle it. So it's that over exaggeration that it's the end of the world. So we really have to be aware of, when those thoughts come up, accept anxiety and all it brings physiologically in our thoughts. That's really key, right? And I'm sure we've all had some experience with what I'm going to go through next, but I find there's just way too much emphasis on trying to change kids' thoughts or change our thoughts. And I talk about this a lot in my trainings, just about, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry of change your thoughts, change your life, right? But that's really hard when we're trying to control and force them. So it's changing our response to them. That's what we really want to focus on. There are some valuable things here, though, I do want to go through just to get kids used to the idea of identifying and getting unstuck from some of those thinking traps. I mean, in all my trainings, I go through optical illusions and how we can use those, which I'm not going to go through today, but we need really kids to recognize, sort of to be critical consumers of their thinking, critical consumers of their thoughts. So being aware of those thoughts, what's helpful and unhelpful. But to do this, we really have to unwind. I'm always talking about when big emotions come up, kids get all mangled up in a big knot of emotion. It's all tangled. It's really hard. And then they're like, if you put your hands right up to your nose, you can't see anything. If that's the emotion, you can't see anything else. That's it. We're stuck in it. So we got to create some distance, bring those worries out from our face, right? We're going to unwind, we're going to disentangle themselves from their thoughts. This is what we call defusion. So defusion, it's a process of creating that distance between ourselves and our thoughts, allowing us to be able to see that those thoughts are just words. They're just stories. They're just mental events. It's not facts. It's not threats. When we can create that distance, we can see the bigger picture. Okay, so for example, if you're swimming in the ocean and right next to you, you see a fin sticking out, your brain is automatically shark. You might not even think the thought shark, but your body is going to go into full gear that this could be shark, right? But if we can zoom out away from the fin, if the fin's right in our face, we're going to be freaking out that it's a shark. But if we can zoom out and see the bigger picture, we might see it's actually dolphins. So that's kind of what we need to do, right? Get them to a place where they can zoom out and see, when anxiety shows up, when big emotions come up, I can recognize what are thoughts, what are stories, what are just streams of words that are coming through, what is just mental noise passing through or passing bodily sensations, passing feelings rather than facts or dangers. Okay. So I'm not asking kids, to challenge their thoughts, to get rid of their thoughts, replace their thoughts, right? The aim isn't about trying to control them or get rid of them or any of that. It's all about that reaction. How can I separate myself from the thoughts just by noticing them? So I need to acknowledge them. They're part of human experience, right? That's part of what's kept us alive all of these millennia. It's part of, what has helped us to survive. And then I'm going to respond in more effective ways by being present and engaged in the mind, being mindful in the moment versus getting carried away with them. And that's what mindfulness is all about. I keep talking about is keeping our prefrontal cortex online so we can think. The prefrontal cortex is what's helping our emotional brain calm down, and it helps us think rationally. We need to keep the Wi-Fi online so we can do that. So that's the whole point of the mindfulness piece. But what I really want to focus on today is now increasing our cognitive flexibility in problem solving. Okay, so the mindfulness, everything that I've talked about in previous weeks and episodes about mindfulness, staying aware, staying present, externalizing when big emotions come up, all of that is relevant. All of that's still really important. When we can keep our prefrontal cortex online, now we can start focusing on that problem solving, right? And through the problem solving, that's going to help them not get overwhelmed with anxiety. I do have other episodes on diffusion and getting unstuck and how we can do those. So be sure to check those out. But looking at problem solving, I'm going into the specific skills kids need. And this is a fundamental coping skill to really help kids tackle any challenge that they're faced with, to be able to take control of the situation, make informed decisions, and navigate whatever is going on, whatever it is that they're faced with. So problem solving, it really fosters resilience because kids can learn, challenges are opportunities for growth. It is an opportunity for learning. It is an opportunity for me to figure it out. It's not some insurmountable obstacle that I need to avoid, right? If they're able to problem solve, they can work through conflict. That's going to improve their relationships. So they're not fighting all the time or running away and avoiding. It's just really helping them build that resilience and prepare them for being successful adults. That's really important. Problem solving is so important because anxiety, like I said, it makes kids feel like they can't handle the situation. And so this process is helping them gain that sense of control and confidence. So first thing we need to do is teach kids the steps of problem solving. Okay, so it really includes identifying what the problem is, because sometimes they can't even articulate that. And if they can't articulate what the problem is, they're just going to get caught up in anxiety that snowballs because they can't really, put their finger on it. We're going to look at all the different parts of the problem. We're going to brainstorm different ideas of how to solve the problem, and look at the feasibility. We're going to weigh out the pros and cons, and then we're going to figure out the best course of action. So we need to help them walk through that process that they're going to be doing. So I'll walk you through it because I think that this is really helpful and it's a really important skill that everybody should have. So we're going to guide them through the problem solving process by asking open-ended questions. Remember, open-ended questions change the brain, and it really helps them keep their prefrontal cortex online and think through things. It helps them think through things and express their feelings really clearly. That's what we want to get to. So first, again, the problem, what is the problem? We got to define it, figure out what that problem is. So we can ask them, what's the problem? Or what is it that you're worried about? I know that we don't want to get caught in content, but we need to have that just so we go through the problem solving situation. So kids need to be able to clearly state what the problem is. Now, sometimes anxiety can make the issue seem way bigger than it is. So by defining that problem, kids can start to see it as something manageable because it's definable. If it's mentionable, it's manageable, right? And so some of the time they might even realize there isn't a problem at all. It's like, oh, actually, I don't think there is actually a problem. I just don't like this, or I'm just right now feeling frustrated. So we might need to clarify, what the situation is. So asking about what happened, about the context, who is involved. We want to break things down. Maybe we can break it down into the physical sensations, the thoughts, the stories, what's going through their mind. You could ask about what's the most challenging part of the problem, right? What's the potential consequences of this problem? So always asking those open-ended questions. I like asking things like, what do you think might happen if this problem isn't solved? Right? So there might be a lot of things as you get, okay, I had a friendship fire. What might happen, right? If I don't solve this, well, maybe I'll never be friends with that person again. So you might have a few different things that you have to prioritize, but really getting to, everything that we've talked about, what feels the most important to you to address first? Or, which part of this problem do you think is causing the most trouble? So my favorite thing to really ask is, if you could make one thing better in the situation, what would it be? Okay, so we really want to ask these questions to help kids break down their concerns into those manageable parts. So we can really start pinpointing what it is that we can problem solve and just take back some control. It's also helping them understand their feelings and their thoughts about the problem too. It just makes the issue way less overwhelming. It makes it way more approachable. So then they can start, once we have that problem defined, the most problematic areas that are causing the trouble, we can start looking for solutions. Okay. So if we were to use a specific example, let's say it was a child who had a friendship fire with their best friends. So first, actually, before we even go into this, we want to validate their feelings. Okay. Before we start trying to problem solve, we want to make sure they feel heard. Okay, because that's important. Otherwise, they're going to hold on to it and they're just going to say, no, 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 nothing's going to work. You're not listening. So they need to feel heard. So, we could say, wow, dude, it really sucks. Go back to the adjective, right? That sucks. That situation sucks. It sounds like you're really upset about what happened with your friend. That must be really hard, right? If they feel heard, if you say, did I get it? Is there more? I always give it back to them, put it back in their lap. So what are you going to do? Oh, tough situation. What are you going to do? That's always the response, right? We're support, we're validating, but then we're showing confidence that they can figure it out. If they say, I don't know, then we can say, hey, I'm here to help if you want help figuring it out. If they don't want help, then you just validate and let them know, hey, if you do want to problem solve and figure this out another time, I'm always here for you. But if they say, yeah, let's, help me figure this out. Okay. That's when we can start going through this process. So we can say, okay, what is the problem? Well, we had a big fight. Now they're not talking to me. So we can ask, what was the fight about? Right? What was said? What did they say? What did you say? We just want to clarify what the problem is specifically and break it down. Okay. So maybe it's the kiddo we're talking to, your kiddo said something sarcastic. They were just trying to joke around. They weren't being mean. They were joking around, but their friend really took it as something hurtful. And now the friend is really upset and the friend isn't talking to them. Okay. We can ask if there's anything else that's part of the problem. So maybe, yeah, they were really hurt and they said that they don't want to be friends or they don't want to play with me. So maybe your child's worried that their friend doesn't want to play with them anymore or doesn't want to be friends anymore. So that could be the big piece, that could be the big piece that I'm worried about, that they won't want to be my friend. So once we've broken it down, we can start to brainstorm different solutions. Again, we're always asking open-ended questions here. We're never doing the problem-solving process for them. We're never giving them ideas or telling them what to do. Always, the open-ended questions are going to change their brain, but it's going to keep us on task too, right, with what we need to do. So we can ask, what are some things that you think you could do to help solve this problem? So we're going to encourage them to come up with as many ideas as possible, no matter how outrageous they might seem. It's really about fostering, creativity, flexibility, ensuring that they can understand the situation from multiple different ways to address the problem. Right? So we're going to ask them, let's just write down all the possible ideas to solve this. Okay, we're going to write it down. If they want to write it down, they can, but we should really write it down. Somebody's got to throw it down. We can throw out ideas as well. But I would say, hey, do you want to add this? I've got another idea. But I really want them to be the drivers of this. If they can't come up with any or, they're running out of ideas and you have some, certainly offer. I've got a few ideas. What do you think? Should we write these down? So always write theirs down. Only write down yours if they're agreeing to write them down. So, maybe different things could be just saying sorry. It could be talking to them, the next day at school. Maybe it's writing them a note or sending a text. Maybe it's inviting them out for ice cream after school. There's lots of different things. So once we run through all of those ideas, we're going to go through the list and cross off any that aren't a good idea, aren't feasible, relatively quickly. When you have a good set, a few feasible ones, we won't be able to do all of them, but a few feasible ones that the child feels confident and are willing to do, weigh out the pros and cons. right? This is really helpful to think critically about different possible outcomes, and it's really helping them with some of the decision making too, another important skill. So again, we're going to ask open-ended questions. What might happen if you say sorry, for example, right? What are the good things that could come out of that? Are there any bad things that could come out of that? I don't know. And there might not be. Then we want them to really choose a solution. Which one do you want to try first? And I would say have a backup plan because the first one doesn't always work. So we want to kind of do that. But pick one. We're going to then go through step-by-step plan to implement it. And the plan really needs to include what actions they're going to take, when they're going to do it, what do they need to say, what are they going to do, right? All of those things are going to be important. So let's say they choose writing a note and then maybe talking to them afterwards, right? Give them a note in the morning and then at lunch, I'm going to go talk to them. Let's say that that's what they choose as best. So we shouldn't, if they ask us, what do you think? Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But we don't want to, judge their sort of decision. But we do want to help them make a very specific plan, right? So how are you going to say it? How are you going to give the letter? When are you going to do it? So, again, first thing in the morning, right now I'm going to write the note. First thing in the morning, I'm going to give it to my friend. And then at lunch, I'm going to go and talk to them and see how they're doing. Okay. So figure out what it is you're going to say to your friend. Where are you going to give the note? All of those little details. We want to make sure that they have that plan and they've got a kind of like dress rehearsal in their brain so that they don't back out. Because if they run into a barrier, oh my gosh, I didn't think about how I'm going to give the note, then they're not going to do it. So if we really kind of think through all of those different variables, we're just building up, their chances for success. So once we have that plan, we do want to reflect on it afterwards. So tell them, after you give your note and talk to your friend, I want to touch base again and see how it went. So we'll talk again after school tomorrow. How does that sound? Right? The reason why we want to do that, and I'll get to that review and reflect in a minute, but all of this learning has to happen. They have to get something from this process. It's not just going through the problem solving. There's got to be more so that they're going to problem solve again in the future. So it's really important, that they put that plan into action, obviously. It's so crucial to build their confidence and their resilience and to show them that hey, I can handle it. And this problem solving is actually worth it. So they actually have to put that plan into action. Then you do the review. So what did you learn from this experience? This is important to reinforce the brain that I can handle it. It's improving their problem-solving skills for the future. So we want to make sure we don't skip this step. So just asking, how did it go? What went well? What did you do that went well? What maybe didn't go as planned? What would you do differently next time? Those types of questions are really useful. So it's important that you're extending their learning too by showing how you problem solve. How do you handle problems in your own life? Seeing how you approach challenges calmly and working through this process sort of systematically, that's going to reinforce their learning as well and reinforce that, hey, this process really is a good thing to be doing. Having them involved too, it's always easier to have ideas to somebody else's problem. So having them involved, like, oh my gosh, I've got this report due tomorrow, but I also have to do this, and I also have to take you to the rink, and I only have an hour. Help me problem solve. I have no ideas. Do you have any ideas? Right? Maybe working through those can be really helpful. I would just make problem solving a regular part of your day. It doesn't even have to be a problem like that. I mean, go through the process for everything from a broken light bulb to a flat tire to we're running late for soccer, right? All of those times are good opportunities to problem solve and just look at quick options. It's going to expand that cognitive flexibility. The more kids practice these skills, the more natural it's going to become. And it's going to be, the first automatic response instead of overwhelm. So that's what we want to get to, is a different response. Like I said, we want to make different plans. Have a plan A, but also have a plan B, maybe a C and a D. And if you don't do it in that time, you can say, how did it go? When you do the reflection, I mean, that's a good time, not just for learning, but do tweaks need to be made, right? It didn't go well because they didn't have a chance to read the note. So I didn't talk to them. I gave the note. Okay, let's go to plan B. What can we do for tomorrow? or right now even, right? Maybe I'm calling them on the phone now. So we want to make sure that just because our first plan didn't work out, it doesn't mean that it's completely kiboshed and no, sorry, kid, there's nothing you can do. You're never going to be friends again. No, that's not it. We might have A, B, C, D, L, Q, Z plan before it works. So that's where the flexibility becomes really important. Those solutions, they might need adjustments as new information arises. That's really important. So this process, it's helpful in any situation. For test anxiety, we're going to start by identifying the specific aspects of the exams that cause anxiety, right? Is it time management? Is it a fear of failure, right? Break all of those fears down into smaller tasks. Maybe it is creating a study schedule. Maybe it's practicing past papers. Maybe it's learning self-talk. Or brain warm-ups for the exam while they're sitting in the exam. So brainstorm solutions for every aspect that they are worried about, and then looking at the best options and create a plan. After they attempt their solution, take time to review the outcome together. How did it go? What worked well? What could you do differently next time? So in any situation, they can really work, through this problem-solving process. And then that reflection is just reinforcing the learning and improving, any future efforts for problem solving. For kids who are socially anxious, they can begin by identifying specific scenarios that cause anxiety. And again, we're going to break it down into smaller pieces, right? And then breaking down different things that they could do into different pieces too. Maybe it's greeting someone. Maybe we're going to start a conversation. Maybe it's joining a group activity. Where is the problem breakdown that we need to work on? And then brainstorm possible ways to handle each of those situations, each of those steps. We're going to evaluate the options. We're going to make a plan. Okay, so that's really important. Now, you've got the script that I've given you now and the steps that you need to go through, but there's other things you can do to promote problem solving. Just encouraging kids to think critically, questioning, analyzing, evaluating information from different situations. So maybe you're watching a movie, you can ask about, what do you think the characters could have done differently in that situation? Or what do you think, Fred would have done and Sally would have done if they were in that situation? What might happen next in the story? What could have happened if they did, if they took path B instead of A, what could have happened? So we want to just start looking at those types of things. And again, problem solving real life problems is helpful. Maybe you want them to plan things too. I love kids being involved in things like it could be planning a family trip, but it could even just be something simple like planning a family picnic. So they have to choose the location. They have to make the shopping list. We're just giving them lots of opportunities to make decisions. And that's a part of the problem solving. They have to make decisions and then put it into plan. I'll have teenagers decide, what do you think the best curfew for you is within reasonable boundaries, of course. I think that's important, but we're giving them that sense of autonomy and that responsibility. You could present hypothetical scenarios that really require problem solving and discussing solutions too. What if you lost your backpack with all of your school stuff? How would you solve that problem? What would you do if you were working on an essay all night and the computer crashed and you lost everything? How would you solve that problem? So hopefully that gives you a few ideas. I'll leave it there for today because I know that was quite a few pieces that I gave you. But for homework, I really want you to practice this. Practice guiding your child through the problem-solving process using real life situations. So you can set up problems, you can use situations that come up, whatever is, just practice daily. That's going to be important because the more they practice, the more natural those skills are going to become. And the more they see those challenges as opportunities for growth and realize I can handle it. I know the process. I've got this. I know exactly what I need to do. Lots to think about. So thank you for joining me today. If you found this episode helpful, please share it, leave a review, have a lovely day, and go help those kiddos be bold and courageous. See you next time.